Hey, how's it going? Justin here with Redis. So, every single time I start an explainer, I kind of like pose this existential threat like, why is the air so bad when I was doing the time series? Or I'm lost in a cave of darkness and evil in a dungeon when I was doing bitmaps. Those are actually valid questions. And I have a lot of questions of how do I figure out to do XYZ with Redis? Because I am an advocate for Redis. So I actually do have a whole team of coworkers and other developer advocates that help me with this problem. So I'm not just asking the question to get you hooked onto the explainer. I am. But yeah, we have a lot of conversations within ourselves, how to, amongst our team, how to actually better educate and better inform our viewers. And right now, I'm working on two things that I think you'll be really excited about. I'm working on a new explainer that's going to cover the updated features of RedisJSON with RediSearch within Redis Stack. And I'm also working with Simon on actually implementing an RU204, an updated course on RedisJSON with RediSearch. So lots of really, really cool stuff. There are clients, RedisOM clients for .NET, Java, JavaScript, and Python. Now, I want to work with Python. I love Python. Python's cool. It's eating JavaScript's lunch right now. So I really want to jump into that. I also want to introduce you to our newest developer advocate, Savannah. She's going to actually help us go through and set up a Flask app with RedisJSON and RediSearch via the Redis Stack application of Redis. And we're also going to have a GitHub repo for you to take a look at of kind of what we've been covering and what we're doing as far as implementing RedisOM with Python on a Flask app. So you can actually check it out later on. So without further ado, Savannah, can you join us?
Hello, hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm great, great. Thank you so much for actually working with me and showing me all this Python magic.
Of course, Python's. So I've been a developer advocate here at Redis for about 6 weeks now, and Python is sort of where I'm specializing because that is where most of my schoolwork, most of my classes and everything for computer science focused in Python. So that is the bread and butter of what I've been doing for the past while.
And while you were going to school for computer science, do you have a particular algorithm or data structure that kind of stuck with you as far as your favorite or the scariest, the most painful one that you've had to endure?
Ooh. So I had a whole class just called algorithms. That was a really interesting, fun class to take. But I think probably my favorite data structure is honestly a dictionary. That's part of why I like Redis so much. I like the power of a dictionary and how easily you can do a lot of things with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the basis of all data structures, really, the larger ones.
Exactly.
I think my favorite one was the skip list. Do you remember that one?
I'm not familiar.
It's like a linked list, only it has like, instead of just one layer, it has multiple layers above it. And it's like a randomized implementation, almost like a flip of a coin of what elements within the first linked list gets to bubble up top. It's interesting. It's really fun. Maybe we'll actually talk about it in a future series of data structures that goes beyond Redis. But that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. I think one of the coolest data structures that I've encountered recently is probably honestly the Bloom filter. I think that's a really fun, like the probabilistic data structures. That's not something we ever talked about really in school because like for classical computer science, the probabilistic data structures are more for like applications, but they're not for like, here's how to learn how to do this fundamental concept.
Absolutely.
So like they're not something that I really encountered until recently. And I think that's such a fun, interesting, quick data structure to learn how to use.
Right. Yeah. And I've noticed that like, once you kind of get comfortable with the concept of a probabilistic data structure and how it's implemented with one particular data type, you can actually apply that whole idea to many other ones. So if you know a Bloom filter, maybe it'll be a lot easier to grasp, like a cuckoo filter or a top K or something like that.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Well, without further ado, I would love to hand the floor over to you so you can sort of walk us through, like the Python app, and basically, all we really want to do is just see how do we get started with like identifying our data type. In this case, it'd be some JSON that I've been playing with, and then how do we turn that into a model, and then ultimately how do we run those models into Python's Redis search capabilities and just do a couple basic searches. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Yeah, absolutely. So
right.
I will go ahead and start sharing a screen here. And I guess the first thing I wanted to mention is just sort of what is RedisOM? And to start off with, we're just going to go over a little bit of like objects and object mapping. So OM stands for object mapping. And we've got, say we, Redis, I am not all of Redis. We've got these OM libraries for .NET, Node.js, Python, and Spring. And for each one of those, there's a whole README. They're great. They're pretty well documented. I'm a big fan. So you guys should check those out for whichever language you like to use the most. And here, this mentions that we're sort of going to look at Python for some of these examples because it is the lingua franca. There we go. So the very first thing, it's sort of like a class. I mean, we're defining it as a class in Python. It is very much like a class. But we can have these different types of models. In this example, we've got a hash model. We're going to use a JSON model, unsurprisingly, since Justin just mentioned that we're reading in JSON data. And we can sort of create these instances of these things like you would most other classes. But the real thing that we're going to get into is how you can save them and then how you can migrate them into Redis objects, Redis OM objects. Is OM objects kind of like an ATM machine, Justin?
I think it is. I think you found one of those. I forget what they're called, but yeah, ATM machine, rip in peace.
So let's take a look at the data that we've got. We've got this nicely organized nested JSON structure where we've got data. Within that data, we've got events. So these are food truck events. We've got a certain number of vendors. We have start times and end times. Now, if I had written this JSON, I might have put the start time above the end time, but that's just me. We've got an ID, a location ID, a location name, and a name for the event. Cool, great, makes sense. All things that you would want to know about an event. You need to know where it is, what it's called, when it starts. That way you can Google it if you forget about it. So in our foodtruck.py, we're going to define a class. We're going to call it an event, and we're going to make it a JSON model. I didn't actually mean to minimize that. So we've got assigned vendors. Cool. And from looking at this JSON, it's a number. It's always a number. We've got, and that makes sense that it's a number because you need to know how many different food trucks are going to be an event. And you can't really have negative food trucks at an event. That might kind of defeat the purpose of the event. So we're going to define it as a positive int. And then we're going to call that positive int a field. And we're going to set the index to true. And that index equals true basically means we're saying that we can search for this thing. And we'll talk about it a little bit later when we get to a full text search. But this index equals true is by itself sort of like a tag. You're looking for a single thing. You're saying, is the assigned vendors 1 or 2? Or is it greater than 2? When we get into the full text search, it's going to be more things that you can't compare quite as easily and more things like a paragraph. But in general, oh man, and I didn't put the start time above the end time. I was wrong. This is fine though. We can have an end time. Well, if we wanted to really get into some data validation, we could check if our end time was before or after our start time. But for now, we'll trust Justin's JSON that these are really actual events and he's not going to send us somewhere that doesn't exist. So we've got an end time and a start time, and these are datetime.datetime objects. And when we first started working on this, I actually had this as a different datetime type. And it turns out that they weren't JSON serializable. They're not JSON serial. And so we ended up using the just datetime.datetime, and that's how that format worked, and we were able to put it everywhere we wanted, and everything works now. So that is something where, because you're going from strings to JSONs to objects, you might have to do a little bit of testing and seeing what types really work for all of those things throughout that whole pipeline. We've got a location ID, a location name, and that's great. All of those things are there. All of those things have to be there. Then we're going to look at a location. And in our JSON, let's scroll down a little bit and find a location. Our locations also have IDs. They have this about field, which is sort of where we're going to talk about that full text search, because food trucks that provide a variety of cuisines, I can't really just say, is that equal to cuisines? Cuisines is in there, but it's not just an equivalency or just a singular check against one value. We've got a URL, we've got information, we've got a type, and we've got another name. And if we scroll a little bit, I think actually these might all have image URLs. But once we get to the vendors, we might have some fields that aren't always there. So when we're looking at locations, we'll again have an ID. We'll have this about, and it's going to be a string. But this is where we're going to turn on that full text search. So that way, instead of saying, is this a single equivalency or comparison, we're going to say, look for this word in this whole thing. It's sort of like a, does the about field contain these words, as opposed to, does the about field equal this word? We've got an image URL. We've got info, which is really interesting because that's where we get sort of into like a nested dictionary structure. But what we're going to do for this instead is call it an embedded JSON model. Real quick though, we've also got a location type and a name. That name we're also going to turn on the full text search for, because you might not know the exact name. You might be like, I think it has this word in it, and we want to know that. So we're going to turn on full text search for that. Then this info, because your computer does actually read things line by line in the right order, we have to define it above it. I don't actually know that that's true, but I'm pretty sure it is. So we're going with it. So class info is an embedded JSON model. And here we've got an address, a city, coordinates, a region, a state, and a zip code. Cool. That's the information. We need to know those things. Once we get down to the vendors, a banner URL. Okay, cool. We've got a list of different types of cuisines. We've got an empty list of events. We have an ID, a logo URL, a name, primary cuisine, and more vendor information. So this is where we're going to start talking a little bit about some of these optional fields. So that banner URL, maybe this is a tiny food truck and they don't actually have like a link anywhere that they can put something. They haven't created it yet. They're working on it. It's in the works, but it doesn't exist yet. So we don't want to require that in our model. We need to be able to say, like, give it to us if you've got it, but if you don't, that's okay. So we can make this field optional, but we can't index on a field that's optional. So that means that we can't search for a banner URL, which with a banner URL is probably fine. I don't know very many banner URLs off the top of my head. And if you look at these, they're like these S3 bucket URLs where I don't know any of these numbers. They're not meaningful. So not being able to search on this field is perfectly fine. But when we look at the cuisines, so this one has cuisines, but maybe one of them down here, way down here. All right, well, let's just say hypothetically, one of these doesn't actually have any cuisines in there. And you can see some of these don't have events. So we can use that instead. So for the events, we've got a list and it has strings in it. And the index is true because that list is still defined as an empty list. That field still exists in our JSON when we read it in. So it's okay that it's not optional. You can have an empty list and that's not the same thing as having nothing there. So for instance, let's scroll way down and find. So here, there's no cuisines. and there's no events, but those are defined as empty lists. That banner URL field doesn't exist here. So it has to be optional. Otherwise, this would throw an error. So everything like this vendor info, anything that you can always define as empty, you can have like as a required field, which means you can search on it. So if the banner URL were text that were more important to us, that we really did want to be able to search on, we might think about adding like an empty string there. That way we can index on it and search for it, as opposed to just not existing at all. Cool. So banner URL, it's optional. Index is false. It's in there twice. Guess what? It doesn't actually matter that it's in there twice, but it probably shouldn't be. It doesn't break anything. But let's get rid of that duplication. We've got a logo URL, which is also an optional string, so we can't index on it. We've got a name, full text search, primary cuisine, it's a string. We want to be able to do full text search. And really, this primary cuisine doesn't need the full text search. That primary cuisine is a single thing. So we can turn off that full text search and maybe save a little time and space, but I'm not totally sure. Justin, do you have any comments on performance of that full text search and how that affects a field?
Yeah, I think that just tag search or just single string search is going to be faster. Okay. So just to give you a little background on this data source, this is pulled from a public API of food trucks within the Bay Area. So mostly San Francisco, South San Francisco, and then Alameda County and Oakland. So yeah, some of these trucks don't have any information given, like Steve and Kate Camp, vendor info, no information, cuisines, events, no information. So we just have really primary cuisine, which looking at this data set, I think it's just like their main food that they offer. So I think it would actually be safe to just make it just a regular string, like a single string. So yeah, everything looks good so far. And yeah, I apologize for this data not being completely full. I just did a full scrape of every single food truck out there. And a lot of these food trucks have absolutely amazing food, but not the most savvy API updated sense.
Yeah. And so then we're going to look at that vendor info again. It's still going to be an embedded JSON model. I made these all full text search because they are those weird addresses. You might remember a street name. You might remember a part of a city name. You might remember part of a state name. I don't know. Maybe you remember that Tennessee has 10 in it, and that's it. But you can find that out. So Justin, looking at this, it looks like those embedded JSON models are sort of always optional. Or is it because they're always that empty dictionary, so we can still have that even though it's all empty?
I think that's going to be the case. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I do believe that the embedded JSON models are going to be considered optional, which is nice.
Yeah. Instead of having to define all of these fields as optional because it's embedded, it's just like, well, it either exists or not, and that's fine. Cool.
Nice.
So we've also got an app.py here, which for Flask apps makes a lot of sense. I think it's probably the default thing that almost everyone probably uses. You can probably change that in a config file somewhere when you run Flask run to be something other than app.py, but that's definitely the easy way to go, is to make your app.py file. We've got an app. It's a Flask app. We've got some functions up here, these build locations, events, and vendors. They're sort of like helper functions. They're not really particularly interesting. They just sort of go through the responses and make it a list of dictionaries. We might want that for some things. We might not want it for other things. It's not all that important. We've got our routes to make new vendors and new events and new locations. So what we're going to do is, Justin, do we have that link for the workshop, the basis of this thing?
Oh, the skeleton app? Yeah.
Yes.
Boop. There we go.
Cool. So what I did was started off with this Redis own Python skeleton app, at that link that Justin just shared for me and took that and changed it to use this nested JSON structure of food truck data instead of the single structure of people data that's there by default. So we also changed the data loader. So if you go look at that GitHub link, you'll see sort of some base instructions on how to start all this. I'm going to go through that in just a second here. But the main thing, the way that we get all of this data to where we can search all of it, is by hitting those APIs that we just talked about, or hitting those app routes that we just talked about, is saying like, okay, well, for event, in our events, we're going to do a post to event/new, and our JSON is that event. We have like, if our status code is okay, we're going to say we created it. Otherwise, I want to print that status code. I want to know what's going on if things fail, which is great, cool. The other big piece of this that Redis takes care of for you is at the very bottom of this app.py file, we see migrator.run. And migrator.run basically takes all of these JSON things that you've put in there, these objects that you've put into Redis, and says, okay, I'm going to make indexes for you. I'm going to take all that and make it searchable. I'm going to do all of this stuff on the back end for you, which is really nice. So the first thing we need to do is start up a Redis instance. Oh no. Oh, hold on. Well, that would be because I don't actually have, I'm not in the right spot anymore.
I'm also going to throw into the chat on Twitch and YouTube a link to our Redis own Python, just in case you want to start looking at some of the client code for that.
Let's make sure I'm on food trucks. Perfect. And then we're going to go source .. my Python environment bin activate. And now when I do docker compose up -d, cool. So on my other screen over here, you can see I've got a Docker instance open. My Docker container is running. Great. Somewhere else, I'm going to go flask run. We can take a look at this URL if you guys want to, but all it is a link to the documentation.
Perfect.
Not the most exciting URL we've ever hit, but that's okay. The real things that we're going to want to do are going to be in our Redis CLI. So now, if you didn't already have your Docker app up and running when you started this, you would need to also run your data loader. And you can see here, it's going to create all these things again. I'm assuming they all have new IDs. I actually haven't done much investigation into what happens when you create vendors with the same names. These aren't sets, so it lets you.
I think you do create, you do end up creating new PKs, so new entities.
Okay. Cool. So we've got all of these events created. And over here, if you notice, oh man, look at that. We've got all of these post requests. So what can we do with all of this? Well, maybe we want to search for something. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do that. We can write a search in here, which is a pretty standard way to do it, I think. I think it makes a lot of sense. This is a lot prettier. The other main thing about Redis search and sort of getting into the stack application of this and getting into the search part is that this little function right here is a lot easier to remember how to write than some of the command line interface commands. Command line interface commands. Yeah, we'll go with it.
This is so true.
For how to search those things.
I've been doing command line interface commands, clicks. We'll call them clicks For the last week, setting up everything for the explainer, and it's not nearly as beautiful as this. So this reads really well. Vendor.find, vendor.cuisines, vendor.vendor.info.city. This is more of what we're used to. So this is fantastic to see.
So one that we can do pretty easily is going to be this by count. So let's say you're going to a food truck event and you're going with a bunch of people, and some of them like to have a certain number of options. They're like, I don't want to go if there's only going to be 2 food trucks. They're like, I need at least 3 options. All right, picky eaters, whatever, we can cater to you. So we can do a curl command and we can just see what happens. And then we can also look and see how that search looks if you actually type out the search command. So let's clear this real quick and stretch this out so we don't immediately jump onto a new line. And if we do a curl, and I'm going to forget what the order of these things are. So I'm going to look at our handy dandy documentation and find an example curl command and copy that part. It's the -- location -- request that I'm always like, am I going to mix up that order? Does that order matter? I don't know. And I don't have to know because I can go look somewhere else for it. HTTP. And then we look here and we say, okay, cool. We called it /event/by-count. And let's say we want at least 2. You need at least 2 options. Oh man, I forgot to end the quote. So that's going to yell at me because I don't know how to end quotes. And we get 18. Cool.
Nice.
There are 18 events where there are at least 2 food trucks.
So it went through all of the indexed vendor counts in our event.
We went through and found, yes, those assigned vendors.
Cool. Assigned vendors. That's really cool.
So that assigned vendors greater than or equal to our number of vendors. And then we returned the string of the length of the match events. That length of a match event, for whatever reason, you can't actually just return an integer. It has to be certain types. So you just put it into a string and it's fine.
There you go.
It works.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to look at the behind the scenes, what happened there, in our Redis CLI, we can run the monitor command. Let's just run that same one again. And you see ft.search:"foodtruck.event.:index at assigned vendors : (2 plus infinity with a limit." Very intuitive, right?
These are the command line interface commands, the clicks that we did previous to our own clients. So it's not very comfy and delicious to look at, but it works.
The intuitiveness is lacking a little bit with the direct interface with that search.
Yeah.
But I mean, so this limit right here is because Redis returns things in pages, basically. So the limit 0 to 10 is those first 10 results, 10 to 10, and then 20 to 10. We're just making sure we get everything. And that's the same as what this .all is going to do. So that .all is what, under the hood, makes those commands run those different limits. But if we just want a number from this type of command, in those Redis documentation things that are so handy sometimes, we can do.
You might want to put that in the CLI.
Oh, you right. Good call. Yes, CLI. Interesting that it doesn't give me back.
Yeah, I don't think you can break out of a monitor. You have to. There you go. Perfect.
That's fair. Yeah. So ft.search. And then it's prompting me for a key here, which is nice. That key is food truck event. Oh, dot event. Colon index though. At assigned vendors colon 2 to positive infinity. And that's, greater than or equal to 2. And if we want just the count, we can do limit 0, 0, and we get 18.
Nice.
Which is great. It's cool. It works the way we're expecting. We get the same number both places.
Best happy path available. Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much. This is really, really cool. Can I just take one more look at the command where we were actually creating the food truck?
We can. And then we can also talk about certain distances. I know you had mentioned bringing a little bit of RedisGeo into this.
Yeah.
Sorry. So which command, before we get to that, which command did you ask about?
Oh, it's just like where we actually create a vendor or an event or a location.
Yes. So here's that event/new.
Okay. Cool. So we're just new event equals event. We pass in the request JSON, and then we simply call new event.save. And it populates, look like, with a PK, the primary key. We return that as the actual, we return that as our happy path. And that's pretty easy. Can't say that that's, any harder than just doing a simple command line. So that's really great. Sorry, my camera's a little weird.
That's okay. And you can look over here when we were doing those vendor/news, like there's that whole JSON that we passed in. You can see it getting, everything gets passed in exactly how you'd expect. It's just a little easier, in my opinion, to be able to say, like, hey, here's a request.json as opposed to let me copy and paste this into a command line and let me make sure that I haven't accidentally misplaced a bracket or misplaced a quotation or not escaped something or accidentally extra escaped something.
Right.
Especially in all of these handy dandy IDEs that we have now. This looks nice. This is easy to read. Mm-hmm. This is a little less easy to read.
Absolutely. Well, funny that you should actually mention Geo because, I'm also really excited about it. But we actually have one of our viewers, Conrad. Can we use this to locate food truck vendors within a certain distance from from our current location? Well, I'm so glad that I didn't Venmo you some cash before the actual stream to ask that question, Conrad. The answer is yes. Yes, you can, as Kai says. Did you add anything with Geo by chance on this demo, or?
I did not end up getting to that today.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah. But we can look real quick at, let's see. So because our vendors in this instance are food trucks, they don't have specific locations, but our events do. So if we scroll all the way back up, oh man, let's just drag that. If we look here, we've got locations. And these locations have coordinates. So, Justin, what can we do with coordinates?
Well, you can actually set it as a data type geo. So when you're actually building out your model, you can actually set it to geo, and then you'll be able to implement georadius, which I've talked about previously in some explainers and in some of our courses. You just create it as I'm not sure what the RedisOM Python
that's fair
implementation is for geo, but within just like the command line interface, we have it documented where it's literally just geo. So you'd have like tag or text. You have it set as geo. And again, I'm not sure if it's like that, but it's definitely very similar. And we can actually, if everybody wants to join us on Discord after this, we can find out and start sharing it out because, we go. I
Oh,
think this is Simon. GeoSearch will come to Redis on Python in the future. It's built into RedisSearch and other clients like Node right now. Okay, cool.
okay.
So this is
So
actually really exciting because we're building it as we're going along.
yeah. So I guess Conrad, yes and no.
Yeah, if you want to hand pack this, with like just writing out the actual commands, you can currently do this when creating the index and with that data type.
Okay.
But yeah, hold tight. Stay tuned for RedisOM Python, or Guy has been furiously coding away at RedisOM Node.js if you want to use Node.js as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for showing this to me. This is really cool. I love Python. I love Flask because it's very like simple and easy to understand, and everything is just laid out very well. I remember back in the days of Django, it wasn't as nice as this, but everything gets better and better.
Yeah. And RedisOM, it calls out on the website that it is very, it's designed, I think the phrasing is designed to integrate with Fast API.
Right.
Which, if you're familiar with Fast API versus Flask, they're incredibly similar. Fast API is just a little faster. It's designed to be a little faster. Just how it's made underlying under the hood, it's designed to be a little bit faster than Flask. But Flask is a super easy way to get started. You've got, if you look through this chat here, everyone in here has that skeleton code for how to get started with a RedisOM Python Flask app.
There we go. And I think the default one has Simon creating person models where we can actually search persons. So that's really great.
It does. And then actually, while we're here, get status. Updated these just a little bit. That food trucks JSON, we added an index. We added something since the last time I pushed it. So
I think we removed a duplicate field name and might have moved to the order of start time and end time.
Okay, actually, hold on. I didn't do that, but before I push this code. And another thing about Flask real quick, while we're here, is that you can see that I changed something, and right here we restarted.
Oh, okay. So it's a hot reload.
It's a hot reload. Flask is fun, but also sometimes frustrating that way. If something changes, it will automatically reload. Most of the time. Almost always.
Right, right.
But if you're ever stuck on something and you're like, I changed this and I don't know why I'm still getting the same error, killing a Flask app is easy, and then it's just Flask run. So it's pretty easy to start and stop your Flask app. It's pretty nice for sort of seeing how all of these things interact. And because this debugger is active, if I had, it's like in the data loader, where we have these printing the creations and printing those status codes. All of those actually get printed into this console, and all of this information is here. If you have this in a production environment, you don't want all of that information printing all the time. That's not really what print statements are designed for, is production. Right. So, yeah.
Fortunately, we get to work mostly in a sandbox environment or not production, so we can share and show and be a little slow and show everything. Great. Well, thank you so much, Savannah. I really appreciate that. Just want to go through some of the comments here. C. Beck says, skip lists are fun. Expressways. Yes, absolutely.
Skip lists remind me of like the express lines of subways.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When I was a coding bootcamp instructor, I got permission and a small budget to get everybody bus tickets, like interurban bus tickets within San Francisco. I let some people take the express bus, and I made some people take the local bus.
Okay.
And we all were going to the ferry terminal, and I was promising them ice cream. And we were going to time who got there faster, the express bus or the normal bus. And it would take 30 minutes for the normal bus because they stop every single stop.
Sure.
And it'd take the express bus like 10 minutes. And it was cruel and unusual, but it was a great way to learn about skip lists.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from Srinath. He has a question particularly about database error code. We can't actually talk about that now because it's a little off topic, but I invite you to go to Discord, our Discord, and you can actually pose that, and we might be able to help you further.
Discord's also great because you can post some code snippets. If you've got a GitHub repo, we've got time to be able to check that out. We can go look at your code, see what's up, be able to help you a lot more with sort of what's the specifics of going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's see who else.
Let's add this one. So, not that one. This one. Is the data being persisted on the host machine? So I showed you a little bit earlier that I do have, can I add my own screen? Simon, will you pop my screen back up for me for a second? Cool. So this container, it's still running. I haven't stopped my Docker container. So if I run Flask run, oh, it's already in use. Did I not actually kill it? No, okay, cool. So that's still open. But even if we do kill this, so we'll kill that, start it back up. Here we can do the same thing. We still get 18. So that data lives essentially for now in this Docker container. So if I open this up, here's the actual container. And if I hit delete here, I get this thing. I'm going to remove this container and all of its data. So if you want to get into persistence, that's sort of a separate piece of how you save things in Redis and how you need to do all of that. You can sign up. I believe we've got, I don't want to say how much memory. I don't want to say how much memory we have for free because I don't know the exact number. 30
megabytes.
30 megs. Okay, cool. So you can sign up for a free Redis cloud instance. And then you can sort of persist that data and learn how to do all of that. And Justin was just mentioning one of the Redis University courses that talks a lot about that.
Yeah, RU 301, which is running Redis at scale. We actually talk about durability, scalability, persistence, implementing Redis clusters, a lot of theory. That's actually a really fun course because it's not very code intensive, but you do basically create servers, create clusters, and then tear them down, start again, tear them down, and you get to learn a lot. So you can definitely persist. There's like 5 different ways of setting up persistence.
I think we've actually got someone giving a talk soon called Florida Man Uses Cache as Database. And when I say someone, I mean the one person on the team that lives in Florida. So that would be Steve.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure where that talk is being given, but he's definitely talking about it.
And I think he might be using .NET too, which is always fun.
I believe so, yeah.
It's always fun to watch.
Hey, look, there's all of our dev relevance.
Yeah, perfect. Well, sweet. Thank you so much. I won't take too much of your time. Again, everybody, if you want to continue the conversation, head over to our Discord channel. Check out our Redis University courses. If you haven't already, there's things such as like we have a full Python course, JavaScript, Java course. We have a streams course. We have a RediSearch course, running Redis at scale course, a security course. And Simon and I are currently banging away at a updated RedisJSON with RediSearch, which is RU204. Okay, I think that's a lot of our bill-paying one-liners. Again, Savannah, thank you so much, and welcome to the team and streaming. Yeah. You did a fantastic job, and I'm super excited to have you working with us.
Absolutely. I'm hoping also, the next time I stream, I'll end up, this is intentionally empty for one of my cats. She will just come and lay here while I work. So maybe next stream we can get her on screen too.
We might just have to have a full-time stream of your cat. That's how we get the Twitch viewers.
Set up a cat cam.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I apologize for the jumble in my background. My studio is moving. I'm moving, so I'm starting to pack some stuff up. I'm going to get one more explainer out of the backdrop, but then you'll see me in a new season with a new backdrop. So, yeah, very exciting stuff. One last thing before we go. Savannah, I want to wish you a very happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Yeah, today is my birthday. I actually meant to find a birthday hat to wear, but I have also actually recently moved and did not make it out to find a birthday hat.
Next time.
Next time.
But yeah,
a year from today, I'll wear a birthday hat.
We're close. But yeah, thank you for taking the time for your birthday to hang out with us and show me how to run Python's RedisSearch client, RedisJSON.
Yeah,
so I appreciate that.
And thank you so much for helping me out with some of the more Redis intense features. Like I mentioned, it has been about 6 weeks since I've been here, so there's definitely a lot more to learn. And like the Redis account mentioned that I think is Simon back there, I'm excited for when Geo gets added.
Yeah.
And we can talk about Redis with Geo in Python.
I'll have to send everybody food truck burritos. All right. Well, everybody, you have a great Thursday, and I'll see you later.
Yeah. And thank you for those birthday wishes. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.